Hello, I'm Adele from Purple Quilting. Thank you for joining me today. I thought that I would record the process of loading a quilt onto my long arm frame because if you're sending your quilt to a long armer, we do ask for some overage for the backing and the wadding. And I certainly had some clients who haven't seen a long arm frame before and don't know how things are loaded. And I think in those cases, the overage we're asking for does seem to be maybe a little bit excessive. Um, So I hope that this would help just to show and explain a little bit more about why we ask for as much as we do. So as with everything in quilting, there are several ways of doing the same thing. So I use the red snapper system, and what that is, you'll see these white, I have white leaders. So the white fabric that's attached to three of my poles are called my leaders. Within the edge of the leaders is a red rod, which is part of the snapper system. And then I have the clamps, which are these, and they come in various sizes. So I have a little 2-inch, 6-inch, and then these are the main ones. And so in the back, you can see it has a channel, and what that does is that locks onto the rod that runs in the leaders. So you put your fabric between the leader and this, and it holds it in place really securely. So that's the system that I use because I find it to be quite fast and easy. So I was going to try and load a small project just so it was as fast as possible. However, it turns out I just make massive quilts. So I have this one that I'm going to load. This is an 80 by 95 inch top. I have an extra wide backing, so I should have plenty of overage for the backing. And the wadding, I had 124-inch wide wadding, which covers the length of my quilt, the 90 inches, with lots of overage. So I cut myself 85, 86 inches so that it accounted for the width with a bit of overage. The backing's more important for me to have a little bit more overage because of the way that you use the side clamps when it's all loaded onto the frame, which I will show you during the process. So first thing to load is the backing. And what you really need is a straight edge that you load at the top and the bottom. So because I have this motor grunge and it's not directional, I'm going to load it with the selvage at the top and the bottom. Absolutely fine to do it the other way around. It just means that you need to have squared up the sides or the top and the bottom of your piece of fabric to give you the best chance of getting it as straight and true as possible. So depending on how I'm loading it, today I'm just loading it in a random spot on the frame, which is absolutely fine. Sometimes I will center it so that I can keep the quilt top centered as well. But this is one of my quilts and it's a little bit easier to try and show you what's happening if I load it more down this end of the frame. So for me, it's this bar that I need to load the backing onto, and obviously we have it right side down. So the rod that I was talking about in the leader is here. I don't know how well you can see it. It's right at the edge of the leader, and that's where I need to get my clamp onto. So I'm just going to position that so that I have enough over the edge of the rod that I can clamp it down without causing any problems. To keep it as secure as possible. And I have a fan on, which is not being very helpful. So what we're going to do is just take a couple of the smaller clamps and just put a couple in to try and hold it in place. Here we go. So this is the backing that's clamped. This is one of my quilts, so I'm happy that I can clamp it and eyeball it, keep it pretty straight and not stretching any of it out. If it's a client quilt, then there are other things that we would generally do to make sure that we've got it centered and we know the width of it, and I have a tape on the back bar that I can keep an eye on to make sure that I've got it centered and I'm not stretching anything out, and that when I'm rolling it on, I'm keeping it nice and straight. But as this is one of my own quilts, and I know I've got tons of overage on the backing, and I'm not too worried if it goes a little bit wonky on the backing. So I'm being a little bit less precise, I guess, just to try and show you the process as quickly as possible. So now that this is clamped on here, we would roll it on. So when you're rolling it on, again, you're just trying to keep it nice and straight as you go in. One of the things that you may also have noticed is that I don't press my backings, which is not a great thing to do. Your long armer will appreciate it if you have pressed your backing, because it does make things, again, just that little bit easier. If there are big creases in the backing, then a little spritz with water as you're rolling it on is really helpful. It just helps them fall out. And as we roll, we're just trying to keep it, again, as straight and true as possible, which is where extra wide backing is really hard to cut straight. So you'll find that the edges are often quite off. If we know we've got a straight edge as you're winding on, can't see it on here, as you're winding it on, you can keep the edge on top of itself, if that makes sense, as you're winding it on. So you can make sure that you're keeping it nice and straight. Where that's not the case, when you're winding it on, essentially you're just looking to keep the fabric as straight as possible. So you can see, for example, I've got some ruckles up in the far end just because it's not sitting straight on the back of the frame. So I just pay some attention to that as I'm winding it on. And you would just always be keeping it as smooth as possible across the pole. And for that, you would usually start from the middle and work out. So I can see at the back that I'm getting towards the stage where I need to clamp the back onto the back leader. So this is the view from the back of the frame. So you can see that I've rolled it on. I could still probably roll it on a little bit more. Here is, again, here is where the rod is that I'm going to be clamping the red snappers onto, and it's overhanging by 1.5 to 2 inches, which I don't need that much extra. So let's just do the same sort of thing as before, and I'm just going to give myself a couple of clamps just to secure it. And then I can just roll it on a little bit more. Okay. So again, I can see that I've given myself about 1/2 inch from the clamp to the edge, and that's going to allow me to keep it nice and straight again. So on this one, I will start from the center. And again, I can just see that that's kept it nice and straight at the top edge. So now that's all secure, I can bring this lead around and bring that back up to where I need it to be. So because of the machine and the way that it needs to move, the red snappers need to be above this back bar for me. Otherwise it interferes with the smooth running of the machine. So now that's in the right place. I can just drop my clamp at the top, bring this further forward, and just make sure I'm still happy with that. Yep. And then we can drop the clamp over here. So at this stage, the backing is loaded, and now I can add the quilt top to this other roller. Okay, so I'm ready to attach my quilt top to this front bar, also known as the belly bar. And you can probably see that I've chosen not to center the quilt top on the backing. So I don't think it makes a major difference. Obviously, under normal circumstances, you might not have quite as much overage, and so centering it just helps to make sure that as you advance you're going to have plenty of space on both sides, because I mean, this is, I think it's like 25, nearly 30 inches spare that I have on this side, and I've got a good 6 inches on the other side. So I would quite like to just keep this in as big and usable chunk of fabric as possible. So I'm going to load mine more towards the right hand side. It's not going to affect me keeping it straight as I move on, because you can see along the back, the pink, that's a measuring tape that's attached to the back bar. And so I can keep my side measurements the same, and I can pay attention to what measurement is actually the center of my quilt. It doesn't have to be 0. And as long as you keep a note of those from the start, as you advance, you can just keep an eye on that and make sure that they're all staying the same. There are also various ways that you can run things across the front to keep it straight, measuring tapes and various slider systems and things like that, that just help you keep it straight and true as well. So ready to attach the quilt top to the belly bar. So all I've done is pop one in around about the middle to start with. So one of the important things to do is to make sure that I'm not stretching the top as I attach it to the belly bar, because that's going to cause me problems as I try and roll it on. So my quilt top measures as 78¼ inches. So I know that my center line, which is this one, because I have 4 blocks, so it's in the middle of the 2 blocks, needs to sit at 39 1/8. I'm probably not going to worry so much about the 1/8, but that is about perfect. So I'm going to pop again just a little securing clamp on that side, and I'm going to repeat that on the other side from my center line, 39 1/8. And just pop another little holder one on there. So now I know that my 2 edges are in the right place. I can start in the middle and just work my way out. And that's the top edge secured and straight as well. So now I can roll this on. And again, when I'm rolling it, I'm just doing a few turns and then smoothing it out to keep it nice and straight, and making sure the edge is staying on top of the edge. So I know it's loading nice and straight. Because this has so much piecing in it, I can also keep an eye on these lines just to make sure that they're staying approximately straight. My piecing is not perfect, so approximately straight is the best that I can possibly hope for. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. And as I said, I can keep a little eye on my markers at the top. I have 40.5 on that side, which means I have 38 on this side. Yep, and that's right. I had it at 78.5. So now I'm just going to pop this bit over and get rid of those loose threads. And we're ready for swatting. I'm just going to check I have this the right way up first. Yep. And this just goes between these two bars. I'm just going to pop that back a little bit at the moment. And then I can pop my quilt top back up. Make sure that is pretty straight. And then I just gather it up and I pop it on top of these shelves just to stop it from lying on the floor. When I advance it, I pull it down just so it lies straight and then pop it up again. So then I would just take a bit of time to make sure all of my measurements were in the right place again. And now I'm going to attach my side clamps. So there are various ways of clamping the sides. As and when I have enough space between the edge and my machine, which I obviously do here, I would use these, which are the red snapper clamps as well. And they have a channel that the fabric just goes in. So you put the fabric in that channel, slide them through, make sure it all goes in. Sometimes you need to use a pin or something just to get it in the right place. Pop it as close to the middle as possible and snap those in place. And then these are the clamps that came with my frame. So I pop that on there and put a little bit of tension on it. This isn't to pull it really, really tight. It's just to stop it from sagging and being pulled in. As I said, these are the clamps that came with my frame. I have 3 of them, so you would pop one in the middle, one at each end, and then apply a little bit of tension to those as well. I would tend to use this where possible, just because these are a little bit deeper, so they're more likely to catch on the machine, although these can catch. But this applies even tension throughout the whole edge of the quilt, of the backing, sorry, rather than having 3 areas where there's some tension applied. It doesn't make a major difference, but it just helps a little bit. If I don't have enough space to use the clamps, rather than putting these directly on the backing, I would tend to use a little bit of material. So you would pin that on as close to the edge as you can, and then the clamp would go onto there. And it just means, again, you're less likely to have any issues with the machine if you're getting quite close to the edge, because you're not going to come right up to the pin, but you're not going to be hitting the clamp either. So you can see with that, it just applies a little bit of tension, and as it just stops it from being pulled in. So if I just bring the machine over to try and show you that, obviously over here, absolutely fine, no problem at all. When it gets to here, so when you're moving the machine, obviously you want it to be unobstructed. And on this is the center of my machine. And what I don't want is that to be in a position where it's going to be hitting that clamp and causing any problems with the smoothness of the stitch out. So in order to do that, I need my machine to come here as the absolute maximum in terms of width, which means my needle's in here. So that is at least 4 inches that I really need to comfortably be able to use the side clamps. And by using the side clamps, it does just mean that everything stays a bit flatter, a bit more square, and again, gives you a better quilted product at the end. So that's why the overage on the sides is really important. And as you've seen, because of the way that it's clamped on and then rolled onto the rollers, we need that little bit of extra at the top and bottom as well.